Today, Nally Elementary would like to recognize all of our March Leaders of the Month. We are so proud of these students for their outstanding leadership in the classroom, playground, lunchroom, and also always displaying the 7 habits here at Nally School. Today, I will recognize each student in each grade level and tell you a little something about them. Okay, starting off in Mrs. Craig's class, we have Ben GAMBOL, who is proactive, puts first things first, and synergizes. Ben has shown much growth while in kindergarten. He loves helping in the classroom and others, even when he needs to be focused on something else. I appreciate him stepping in to help clean up and keep Mrs. Craig on track. Way to go, Ben. In Mrs. Rankin's room, we have Casey Buxar. Casey synergizes. Casey is a kind, caring friend to all. She is a happy-go-lucky girl who always wears a smile on her face. Casey is good at synergizing as she is always willing to work with anyone. Also in Mrs. Rankin's room, we have Damian Lunsford, who puts first things first. Damian has been a leader in room 103 this year. He puts first things first and leads by example. You will do great things next year in first grade. Way to go, Damian. In Mrs. Parton's room, we have Maverick Facemeyer, who is proactive. Maverick makes the day in kindergarten very fun. He brings a smile to everyone. He continues to get stronger and more consistent when working independently. You are doing a great job, Maverick. Also, we have Lana Beard, who is proactive. Lana is very thoughtful and cares about everyone. Mrs. Parton said, I love how she includes all friends and goes out of her way to make sure they are happy. You are an amazing friend, Lana. In Mrs. Zukowski's room, we have Addie Lloyd. Addie is proactive. Addie has recently come to Nally School. She seamlessly joined our family in room 102. Addie chooses to do the right thing. She loves learning, and we are so glad she's in our class. Welcome, Addie. Also, we have Tommy TEATER in Mrs. Zukowski's room. Tommy is proactive and begins with the end in mind. Tommy has made learning how to read his big rock. He has proactively put forth his best effort in learning sight words and tapping out words. He works hard at school and at home. Way to go, Tommy. Also in kindergarten, recommended by Mrs. Tucker and Mrs. Parton, we have Stella Mullins, who synergizes. Stella synergizes with her classmates in both Mrs. Parton's class and in Mrs. Tucker's class. She is a friend to all, and we love her choose kind attitude. Way to go, kindergartners. Okay, moving on to first grade. In Mrs. Rector's room, we have Noah Hoskinson, who is proactive and begins with the end in mind. Noah has worked very hard this year. Even when things are difficult, Noah keeps trying. Noah has been putting extra effort into his handwriting lately, and it shows. Super work, Noah. Also in first grade, we have Tatum Tesmer. Tatum is proactive and puts first things first. Tatum comes to school with a positive attitude and ready to learn. Tatum is a great friend and makes the classroom a better place. Also in Mrs. Fiesler's class, we have Philip Graholahovic, who demonstrates habit 1. Philip has really improved his attitude, motivation, and effort with learning, and we appreciate his kindness and leadership in our classroom. Way to go, Philip. Also in Mrs. Fiesler's class, we have Asher Williams. Asher sharpens the saw. Mrs. Fiesler said, you can always count on Asher to include others when sharpening the saw. He loves to gather a team and play some football. Way to go, Asher.
Now in Mrs. Beard's class, we have Aubrey Dean. Aubrey is proactive. Mrs. Beard nominated Aubrey for being proactive. Not only does Aubrey show she is a leader by making sure she is always ready to learn, she also leads by showing kindness daily. She is always ready to offer help to others and genuinely cares how her classmates are feeling. We are so lucky to have such a kind friend in room 106. Also in Mrs. Beard's class, we have Casey Hartman. Casey puts first things first. Mrs. Beard nominated Casey for putting first things first. Casey shows she is a leader by coming and getting right to work each morning. She is a very responsible, helpful, and kind to others. Keep up the great work. In Mrs. Bazer's class, we have Avery Walmer.
Avery Walmer.
Avery Walmer synergizes. Avery works well with her classmates and encourages them to achieve their personal goals. Thank you, Avery. Also, in Mrs. Bowser's class, we have Maddie Mazik.
Maddie Mazak.
Maddie begins with the end in mind. Maddie
sets academic goals
for herself and works hard to achieve them. Way to go, Maddie.
Good job, first grade. Okay, moving on to second grade. In Mrs. Truax's class, we have Kenzie Evans, who begins with the end in mind. Kenzie begins with the end in mind by finishing her work and then volunteering her time to either grade papers or tutor other students. She makes sure she fully understands the concepts so she can answer questions to her students. Keep it up, Kenzie. Also in Mrs. Truax's class, we have Hunter JANSEN, who puts first things first. Hunter has been proactive in math. He has been working extra hard, focusing on what he is doing, minimizing all distractions. Hunter always has a positive attitude and is always smiling. Keep it up, Hunter. In Mrs. Slimak's class, we have Ezra Vance. Ezra is a responsible student. Every day you can hear him announce the buses with a loud and clear voice. He is dependable and helpful to all. Way to be a bus leader, Ezra. We also have Melania Prinzo in Mrs. Slimak's class, who is proactive. Melania takes every opportunity she has to correct and return her tests and work. Her extra effort at home does not go unrecognized here at school. Great work, Melania.
In Mrs. Van Dorsen's class, we have Lola Hubbard. Lola puts first things first. Mrs. Van Dorsen said Lola has made amazing progress. She works hard on all assignments first, then she is able to keep focusing and win at learning. Next, we have Thea Merchant. Thea seeks first to understand. Mrs. Van Dorsen said Thea has been working on changing behavior so she can finish her work and seek to understand how to do her best. Now in Mrs. Grandin's class, we have SHAELEE Young. SHAELEE puts first things first and seeks to understand. Mrs. Grandin said, I have really seen SHAELEE grow with leaps and bounds to other habits. Her first participation has skyrocketed from the first of the year. She put first things first with her work and takes an active role in learning. So impressive. She has really learned to seek first to understand too. Because we are all different, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. SHAELEE has made a lot of growth in understanding when an adult needs to know information and when a child's actions are their own consequence.
Way to go, SHAELEE.
Next, in Mrs. Grandin's class, we have Owen Young. Owen puts first things first and sharpens the saw. Mrs. Grandin said Owen Young is another one of that has grown with an impressive speed. This little guy has made tremendous gains with learning and to put first things first. He is learning to get the important things done first and then sharpen the saw at the station activity. Keep growing, Owen.
Okay, moving on to third grade, we have
Lennox Lee in Mrs. Brayley's class, who begins with end in mind.
Lennox Lee is new to Mrs. Brayley's classroom. Mrs. Brayley said one day when there was indoor recess, Lennox asked if she could work on her economics project in the library. Mrs. Brayley said, I am proud of her for beginning with the end in mind. Lennox, we are happy to have you back here at Nolly. Also in Mrs. Brayley's class, we have
Sophia Flayler, who is proactive and begins with end in mind.
Good. Sophia works hard every day. On days where she has missed school, she is always responsible and gets her work. The next day, she brings it in, not missing any of the strategies that have been taught. I am proud of all of Sophia's hard work in third grade. Okay, moving on. In Mrs. Stasnis's class, we have
Brody Miller, who is proactive and
synergizes. He synergizes. Brody has been voted by his classmates this month. They have noticed that he is working hard to pay attention and always helps friends out when they are hurt. Keep being kind, Brody. We also have Alex Lazik,
who is puts first things first.
Okay, Alex Lazik. Alex works hard every day to be sure he's following directions. Mrs. Stasna said, I appreciate his careful attention to detail to his work. Keep up your positive attitude, Alex. Okay, moving on to Mr. Straub's class. I wanted to recognize one student. He has already been picked by another teacher back in December for Leader of the Month, and that was Sean Durant. But Sean was also being recognized by Mr. Straub this month, who is proactive. Mr. Straub said Sean was not getting his homework completed at home, but he took it upon himself to stay in for the first few minutes at recess to complete it so he could enjoy the rest of recess. Way to be proactive, Sean. Also in Mr. Straub's class, we have
Oakley Smith, who puts first things first.
Oakley has shown growth in the room by working hard to get her work done so she has time to sharpen the saw with her friends. Good job, Oakley. Okay, moving on to Mrs. Esterly's room, we have
Gianni Prinzo, who
synergizes. He synergizes. Mrs. Esterly said, for Gianni, this month the class chose Gianni for his ability to get along with everyone. Gianni is a problem solver and a great leader and represents a true Panther. Wow, Gianna, great job. We also have
Ellie Freeman, who puts first things first.
Okay, Ellie Freeman in Mrs. Esterly's class comes to school every day ready to learn. She is always prepared by having pencils sharpened, her books out, and always completes her work on time. She represents Panther Country well. Great job, third graders. Okay, finally to fourth grade. In Mrs. Oaks' room, we have Caleb Schreiner. Caleb is proactive and begins with the end in mind. Caleb has a great brain and loves to use it. He goes above and beyond on almost every assignment and loves to add his own flair. I love his out-of-the-box thinking. Keep it up, Caleb. We also have Isaac Hessler in Mrs. Oaks' room, who is proactive. Isaac added a new school job to his daily routine so easily. I'm proud of the way he handles his responsibilities independently without making a fuss. He is choosing to be a good leader every single day. Great job, Isaac. In Mrs. Toth's room, we have Carson Tipton, who puts first things first. Carson has worked hard by putting first things first. Great job, Carson. You are always ready to go and ready to learn in fourth grade. We also have Savannah NICKLE in Mrs. Toth's room, who synergizes. Savannah is always ready to jump in and substitute as a kindergarten bus helper when one of our students is absent. Thank you for synergizing, Savannah. We appreciate you.
In Mrs. Mattson's class, we have Kara Kemple. Kara is proactive. Mrs. Matson said Kara is a good student who works hard to do well. She is also kind and a good friend to all. Keep it up, Kara. In Mrs. Gardner's class, we have Kadyn Davis. Mrs. Gardner and Mrs. Hansel nominated him. Kadyn is proactive. Kadyn has worked so hard this year to be the best fourth grader he can be. He is responsible, puts fourth grade effort, and has a great attitude about school. We are proud of you, Kadyn.
Thank you to Riker Clusty and Emily Lyons, who are our speakers today for the leadership video. Congratulations to all of the NOLI Leaders of the Month. The entire staff here at NOLI is so proud of you. Please keep up the great work and your outstanding leadership. Way to go!